Zimbabwe. You are listening to Studio 7 from the Voice of America on Wednesday, November 5th, 2014. And this is Live Talk. I'm Blessing Zulu.
And I'm Gibbs Dube.
And tonight on Studio 7 Live Talk, we are going to talk about the U.S. midterm elections.
To join the discussion, phone us directly at this number, 001-202-619-2077, and we'll call you back.
And as usual, Live Talk goes out to Zimbabwe on our 909 medium wave frequency and on the 4930, 5940 and 15455 kilohertz shortwave, Monday through Friday at 8:30 p.m.
And on the internet, you can find us at www.voazimbabwe.com, www.voashona.com, and www.voindebele.com.
My view is that the Republicans are pro-business, so we are hoping that from that premise, they will look at developing more trade with Africa and then maybe work with the president on something which will be good for the expansion of African trade.
Umongameli Obama utshilo ntambama izolo ukubana hayi ngani sebewinile ama-Republicans kodwa ke uzazama ukusebenza lawo lapha akwanisa khona lapha behlulana khona bengazwanani uzasebenzisa ma-executive power ukwenza ezinye izinto afuna ukuzenza yedwa lapho athola khona i-resistance.
Zviri kubuda pasarudzo hazvisi kundishamisa ma-midterm elections muno muAmerica nekuti tikatasa nyaya yeupfumi wazhinji muno muAmerica wasikufara kuti iri kufamba sei uye pane chirwere chakanyuka chakabva kuWest Africa chinonzi Ebola uye kune kurwisana kuriko kuMiddle East nyika dzakafanana neSyria uye neIraq kune group rinozviita ISIS wana wasikunzwisisa kuti zvinozofamba sei muno muAmerica. Saka izvi ndandichizvikarira kuti sarudzo idzi vanhu vanenge vachirengedza kunyunyuta pamusoro pemutungamiriri wenyika uchibudikidza nevanhu vanenge vari vakavamirira munzvimbo dzavo.
Once again, thanks for joining us, and you are listening to Studio 7 Live Talk. And tonight on Live Talk, we are talking about the U.S. midterm elections.
Republicans seized control of the U.S. Senate and were on track to control or have their grip on the House of Representatives and governorships. With the Republicans controlling both houses and the Democrats with only the White House, there's a call for bipartisanship.
But what are the takeaways for Zimbabwe and Africa in how to conduct elections? And for Zimbabwe, does this mean a real look at the so-called targeted sanctions?
If you wish to join the show right now, phone us directly at this number, 001-202-619-2077. Ye, kunjalo ke foitu.
Konguka Gibbs nasi tida kuti tinge tichitarisa nezve sarudzo dzemuAmerica dzakaitwa nezuro. Tirikuona kuti pamatare ose reSenate nere House of Representatives Republicans ndo akabudirira asi vaObama vachiri panyanga kuWhite House. Nekudaro parikunzi vanhu vanofanira kunge vachishanda pamwe chete. Asi chiri kutaurwa nezvizvarwa zveZimbabwe zvakawanda zviri muno muAmerica inyaya yekuti sarudzo dzinoitwa murunyararo pasina bata murefu bata mupfupi yatinomboona panoitwa sarudzo dzekuZimbabwe. Uye tataurawo navamutsvangwa vanhu vaiwo muteedzeri wegurukota rinoona nezvekudyidzana nedzimwe nyika vachiti varida kuti nyaya dzezvirango dzinge dzichitaurwa nezvadzo. Gibbs
ivakambe Zulu kandaba lingatshona njani lapha likhona khona ngapha ngemakaya thina ngapha lo Blessing siyaphila sibile kwamagama esikhuluma ngakho namhlanje ke lukhetho lweMelika lapha sibona khona ama-Republicans ephuma ke kuthiwa yi-sharpshoot aphume sibili athatha ke iSenate kwazobuya ukuthi khona ngale iHouse of Representatives baphinda banjalo nje bayibamba singeyabo. Singathi ke ama-Democrats Blessing njengokutsho kwakho asebambeke i-White House iSenate azibamba futhi le-House of
Representatives.
Yes. So kube sokubuya ama-Democrats lokho esele White House lokho kuyahlupha kodwa abaningi bathi asebenzileni phela ndawonye. Yabona kume njani?
Of course, for those of you who are just joining us tonight on Studio 7 Live Talk, we are talking about the U.S. midterm elections. And we have, luckily, an in-studio guest, that is Jim Malone. He's a senior political analyst here at VOA, a political guru, if we may use that term.
Thank you.
Gibbs, you can fire away.
Thank you so much. I know that you have been covering these elections for years and years. So give us an analysis of the outcome of the elections.
Sure. First of all, it's wonderful to be with you.
Thank you so much. The pleasure is ours.
Very good memories of Zimbabwe from my past, from my past travels in Southern Africa. So it's great to be talking to people there and to try to maybe inform them a bit about what happened last night.
Exactly.
And I think we can visualize President Obama standing somewhere and someone pulling the rug out from under him. I think that'll give you the practical effect. This was a political blow, no doubt about it. Look, Mr. Obama is going for his last 2 years as president. Presidents at this stage in their careers and their terms, they want to shape their historical legacy. This is going to make it harder because he's got a new political reality to deal with now, and it's going to be difficult. He already was dealing with it. As you know, Republicans had control of the House of Representatives and basically were able to block a lot of things he wanted to do. He would block them. Now with control of the Senate, really control of Congress is in the hands of the Republicans. They will certainly try to block him where they can. They will try to perhaps pick apart the health care law, which was his signature achievement. And they will also try to pass bills on their own, things that are of importance to their supporters. It may have to do with energy, taxes, budget cuts. It sets the stage probably for a lot of infighting, more gridlock in the next 2 years. And how will the world see that? Well, we'll find out.
But, some analysts are saying that this election was a referendum on Obama himself. I mean, people in Africa can relate more to the issue of Ebola, for example. There are some analysts here who are saying that maybe, people were not very sure how the Obama administration was handling the issue of Ebola. There's also the problem of ISIS and, of course, the economy. How do you assess that, Jim?
It's all in that mix, and that's a great encapsulation of some of the concerns that voters had. Two things about voters. The exit polls, that's when you talk to voters when they come out, tell me why you voted, tell me why you're upset. They're upset about a lot of things. And it may not all be President Obama's fault, but unfortunately, if you're the incumbent president, they usually wind up taking it out on you, and that's what happened in this election. There are signs of the U.S. economy doing reasonably well. Jobless numbers, economic growth. What Americans have been grappling with since the Great Recession of a few years ago is our economic future. People are worried. They don't think they're going to have the same future they knew when their parents were alive or that the kids are going to have. So that's a real concern. You mentioned Ebola, which has become a bit of an issue. It broke late in the campaign. And what Ebola manifested to American voters was, this is a test for the Obama presidency. How are you handling this? Are you making us safe, etc.? So that's how that played in. And then, of course, you have ISIL, the ISIS business in the Middle East. Also a matter of concern because we saw the decapitations, these horrible things. Makes Americans sort of uneasy. So all of this leading to an unpopular president at the moment. This is what happens in a midterm election. Boy, pow. They really landed on him with a big thump. And now Republicans, sure, what is Obama going to do now? That's a question. But also, what are Republicans going to do? Are they just going to obstruct, or are they going to look for ways to compromise?
Bipartisanship, that's where it comes in.
And then maybe talking about Africa, are Republicans going to be anyway different to what Mr. Obama has been doing? Or maybe they'll actually have something for Africa and Zimbabwe?
I think we'll have to see how that develops. And certainly you guys have been following even developments in Congress and the administration, how they are dealing with African countries, how they are dealing with the continent as a whole. I mean, we all know the story that Obama comes from Africa. I mean, his father and so forth from Kenya. There's such a huge African connection. And I also know that in some quarters there's been a sense of disappointment that there hasn't been more attention paid in terms of U.S. policies and so forth. So that's there. We're going to have more conservatives having a role in Congress. They're going to be committee chairmen in the Senate now, people like John McCain who want to be very tough on ISIL. So there's going to be a focus there on Ukraine and the Russians. It could also lead to, maybe more of a focus on some human rights issues in Africa, although certainly Democrats haven't been shy about raising those things either. So it'll probably be incremental change, if at all. And I think a lot of the focus will be on security both at home and abroad, and particularly this threat in the Middle East. You will see a lot of more prominent Republicans now who have greater roles of authority in the Senate speaking up. So that could affect U.S. foreign policy moving ahead.
And let's just talk about American democracy, the checks and balances, because as you know, in most African countries, the president is all-powerful. There's still the big man mentality that, the president is Mr. Know-it-all. Just tell us the dynamics between the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. How do they balance each other out so that there's this democracy in America?
Sometimes I wonder what the world thinks of our electoral process. And there's so much money spent, and so much of it is on television.
Interesting.
And these people are talking endlessly, right? And there's no end to the campaigns, right? For example, the 2016 presidential campaign, do you know when it started? This morning. Okay. So we get that. But here's the thing. At its root, the essence of American democracy is the politicians still are very mindful of the voters. They are trying to pay attention because they know they can be thrown out. And we saw some of that last night.
Yeah.
So there is an accountability here. It's messy. It's confusing, I think, especially to folks overseas sometimes. They don't quite understand it all. But this election was rather simple in the sense that the Republicans succeeded in nationalizing the election. They made it about Barack Obama. He's not in a good place right now. Therefore, the Democrats suffered. Now, moving ahead in 2016, it will be a different election year. And the Democrats hope their normal coalition of younger people, minorities, more women voters, Hispanic voters, Asian Americans, will turn out to vote. That's what carried Obama to 2 presidential elections.
Victories,
But in these midterm congressional years, Republicans seem to have a turnout advantage.
So most probably you want to rush. And the last question is, Mr. Obama is not the first one to face such kind of challenge.
Right.
So give us your kind of,
sometimes we speculate and we over-anticipate what's going to happen. There's a lot of gloom and doom now. Oh, they're going to have gridlock. They'll never agree on anything. Look what's happened the last few years. Sometimes you don't know what circumstances can present. Sometimes there could be opportunities for agreement. There's been some talk of perhaps improving the tax structure, tax reform here in the United States, which is a big issue. Trade. Investment trade, and who knows, some of that could involve more trade with African countries. So that's something to keep an eye on. So there's that. And if you look back when Bill Clinton faced this kind of problem, he was able to rebound and get some things done. Ronald Reagan, a Republican, suffered second-term losses, but he was also to open up some more negotiations with the Soviets. So it's hard to say. Let's see how it plays out. Both parties have a stake in cooperation. But our polarized politics means they also must pay very close attention to their base and their parties. You guys know this from covering Africa anyway.
Indeed.
You got to take care of the folks at home first. They're the ones who get you there. So sometimes reaching out is too risky, right? So, but let's see. But one thing out of the election returns also, Americans do want the parties to work together. They want the president and the Congress to find a way to work together. We know that's there. Whether they can do it, another great test of our democracy.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Jim, for your brilliant analysis and setting the pace. I think the discussion from now will be richer with that background, of course.
Well, thank you for the questions, and it's great being with you guys.
Thank you so much. And we look forward to be inviting you again.
I hope to come back.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim.
And of course, for those of you who are just joining us tonight on Studio 7 Live Talk, we are talking about the U.S. midterm elections. And of course, the Republicans did manage to secure the Senate yesterday. Gibbs.
Njengoba simzwile lapha ke umnumzana uJim Maloney ongu-senior political analyst Voice of America khona ngapha eWashington. Uyakhuluma lapha ke uthi wenxa yama-Republicans angatshintsha okunye kungaba khona like okwenziwa ngumnumzana uBill Clinton. Uyakhuluma sibili sithi umnumzana uBill Clinton wayenelisa ukuthi azama ukuthi ahlanganise okuningi ngeblessing. Kuze buya ke nxa sesikhangela futhi umnumzana uRonald Reagan laye walwisa wagcina eqhubeka into eziningi ezinjengeSoviet Union. Yaqinisiwa khona kodwa ayekwenzayo kuthiwa kuyasebenza. So nxa sekhuluma ke umnumzana uMaloney uthi abantu beAmerica bafuna ukuthi kube lani lokubambana abantu bekhulumisana amabandla lawa. Nxa ngakhulumisana then kungalunga. ungalunga sibili so ke sibona ngazani hayi kungani kuyahamba kahle ke mfowethu.
onguka tanzwa hapo kubva kuna Jim Malone no nyanzvi munyadzi zvimatongerwo enyika muno pano pa Voice of America achitaura iye nezve zvinoreva sarudzo dzakaitwa nezuro dzesenate idzo dzakakwanisa kunge dzichikundwa nemarepublicans iwo kunge achitora dare resenate. Gibbs.
Joining us right now is one of our second guests, and that is Thokozile Mkwananzi. Thokozile Mkwananzi is a Zimbabwean living in USA. Good evening and welcome to the program.
Good evening. Thank you for having me on the program.
Thank you for joining us. Blessing, I think you can...
Yeah, of course, Thokozile, you were following what is... or what happened last night, and also the campaign period, which is very important because, in some African countries, Zimbabwe included, the campaign period is actually very dangerous. People lose lives, there's a lot of violence. What are the takeaways from what happened during this midterm election?
Well, I think for me, it speaks really to the kind of country that the U.S. is, the level of democracy that the country has, the ability for people to be able to speak their minds and to be able to express themselves. Whether the expression is accurate or inaccurate, that's another, discussion, certainly. But, the fact that, people were able to, campaign and they were able to advertise and the media, of course, played a very good role in terms of, creating that balance, where if you had the money, you could at least, pay for the commercials that you wanted, the adverts that you wanted, so you could convey the message that you wanted. And certainly the people had a chance to make their decision, and they made their decision last night.
Yeah, ngasukangeleke siyakhuluma ngesintu lapho ukuthi amaZimbabweans angafundani ngokhetho lolu.
Well, into eqakathekileyo of course ukuthi sibe ngabantu abangani bahloniphana. Sibone ukuthi khona singalalela njani abanye abantu nxa kuyukuthi ba express ama opinions abo. And njalo ukuthi sikhangele ama candidates not ngokuthi umuntu uvela kuyiphi tribe kumbe umuntu ukhuluma luphu ulokhuzeni ilanguage enjani. But I think it's all about accomplishments and what anyone is able to do for the country. I think that should be the basis in terms of ukuthi nxa kuthi we're electing people. We should really elect them based on their qualifications and their ability to be able to serve a country. That is what is important. And nxa kuyukuthi thina it doesn't matter what language you speak. It doesn't matter what culture you're from. It doesn't matter what tribe you're from. But if someone is able to deliver the goods that the country is looking for, I think that's what we should be voting people for.
And you are talking about the media and that if you have got money, you can... of course, advertise yourself and do all sorts of things. But these elections are becoming expensive, right, Tokos?
They are very expensive. But you also have to look at it from the perspective, that when people know that you have a product and that you have a service that you can offer the country, they are willing to invest in that individual. They are willing to pour the money. Some of the candidates did not necessarily have the money that you and I probably would want them to have. But what happened? They got the support network that was able to deposit those funds that were necessary for them to have the effective campaigns that they had. So it's all about delivery, right?
Yeah.
When a product is good, people are willing to put money into it. And I think that's what we saw in these elections.
I think that is a very, very important point there. To just translate for the benefit of our Shona listeners, what Thokozile is saying is kana paine kuti uite unge uchisarudzwa muno muAmerica zvinenge zvakutidhurei handiti Gibbs. Panodiwa mari yakawanda yekuti unge uchikwanisa unge uchiadvertisa. Asi sematauriro ari kuitwa naTete Thokozile, kana vanhu vaona kuti une zvauinazvo zvaunokwanisa kuti unge uchiita, vanokwanisa kuti vakupe mari. Nekudaro unokwanisa kuti nyange unogona ngori murombo asi pfungwa dzako maideas ako ndo anoita kuti unge uchikwanisa kuti ubatsirwe nevamwe munyaya yekutsvaga rutsigiro. Gibbs.
I think we are joined by a third guest who is based in Bulawayo. That is Mr. Meli Dube, a political analyst and is the acting Bulawayo Agenda Director. Mr. Dube, good evening and welcome to the program.
Good evening, Gibbs. Good evening, listeners. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. What can you say about the elections, deep down from Bulawayo?
I think the first point is that generally, I think the Americans themselves have a right to choose their leaders, and they've expressed themselves under no duress at all from what we know. And it's important for a leading democracy to sort of show the world that democracy is a living concept. It's something that can still be achieved. And I think all nations that have unreasonable leadership should aspire some kind of level of that kind of maturity.
And earlier on, we talked to Zimbabwe's Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs, Honorable Chris Mutsvangwa, and he was saying that maybe with the Republicans controlling the Senate, this might be the time to talk about the targeted sanctions. What is your take on this?
Yes, targeted sanctions, there could be a chance, of course, of talking about those targeted sanctions. But what has to be remembered is that when Obama came into power, he took over from Republicans, and Republicans didn't take kindly to any human rights abuses by ZANU-PF. So if they think that Republicans will smile and say all sanctions are gone and we're changing all our policies vis-a-vis Zimbabwe, I think they are dreaming, and they should get real, because that is not true. It's not going to happen overnight. Those things will not change. They have to change themselves, their stance and their attitudes and their human rights record, and then the world can recognize them. I don't see it happening.
Now, let's talk about the Republicans. Now, are they going to handle Zimbabwean matters differently from Democrats, if you look at the Senate?
When I really look at the Republican agenda, for me, the economy, I think, is the most important aspect, to the extent that if Zimbabwe would make the right economic decisions for the country, I would say at that point, maybe we could see a different response from the Republican Party, in my mind, because the economy is really key. Even in their decisions, when you look at even the elections, the economy, I think, was really one of the top, issues that people were voting for. And I would think that the Zimbabwean government, I think, needs to come to a point where they start making decisions that will really benefit the masses and not necessarily individuals. And I think once those policies are in place, that are attractive to foreign investment, I would think that the Republican Party would take a different position towards Zimbabwe.
Let's go to Melly. Are you still on the line?
Yes, I'm on the line.
Let's talk about debates, because one of the things that we saw the Americans doing is they will bring the competing candidates on stage, and then they will discuss issues. I remember at one time the late Vice President Simon Muzenda, may his soul rest in peace, but he said in Mashingo at one time, even if ZANU-PF fields a baboon or a donkey, you must vote for that baboon or a donkey. It was really not issues based. Is this not something that needs to be done? I saw you were trying to do that in the last elections in Zimbabwe, trying to bring politicians together to talk about issues, to debate. Is that not the way to go?
That is definitely the way to go. I think my sister spoke well that, in Zimbabwe it's about the individuals. It's not about the greater good. And also there is still that continuity of sort of using the state apparatus for the benefit of just individuals and a few. So honestly, we're not at the level of talking about issues that affect the generality of our people. And in all honesty, that's why all our elections will not matter, because those individuals have to win, come hail, come thunder, come whatsoever. So it is not about the quality of the candidate. It is not about quality decisions when it comes to the management of the economy. It is not about the greater good. It is about the individuals. And all systems have been put and designed in order to perpetuate individualism, egocentrism, selfishness, and sectoral interest of just a few elites that are running the country.
Thank you so much, Melly. And of course, we want to take this opportunity to thank our in-studio guest, Tokozile Kwananze. Toko, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
And of course, for those of you who are just joining us tonight on Studio 7 Live Talk, we are talking about the U.S. midterm elections. And we have many in-studio guests today. Of course, first we had Jim Malone, Senior Political Analyst, VOA, and Tokozile Kwananzi, a Zimbabwean living in the U.S. And we are lucky. We are also being joined by another Zimbabwean based here in the U.S. That is Aleta Muzorewa. Tinokutambira nemfaro pa Studio 7.
Aiwa tinofara kunge tiri pano.
Muri kuonawo sei mafambiro akaita sarudzo dzanezuro nezvatingadzidzewo sevana vezimbabwe?
Funny you should ask mubvunzo iwoyo nepamusana pekuti madeko pandakaenda kunovhota ndakatambirwa nemuRepublican nemuDemocrat vakandipa their ballot samples. And when I went in to vote, voted my choice, coming back out ndikavatenda ndikati izvi hazvikwaniko kwandinobva. Tendai kuti munogara munyika inorespecta the different positions. Ndakabatwa pamoyo, knowing kuti these are different people of different partisanship, and yet they were sitting side by side, chatting in between voters walking in. That was impressive. It could not have been more peaceful than that.
Yeah.
Do you think Zimbabweans can, take a leaf out of that and use it, or is just something that can never happen?
Absolutely. We are learners. We learn. Zimbabweans learn. And that's something that I don't see how difficult that could be to implement. We are naturally very good people. And I don't think much of what is going on right now is at the heart of who Zimbabweans are. And let's not make a mistake about that. It is not how Zimbabweans truly are. I think that Zimbabweans have a capacity in them to really to get along side by side, provided the leadership is encouraging of that.
Indeed. Because, for example, if you look into the Nkomo family, the late Vice President John Nkomo was the Vice President, and he was a member of ZANU-PF. And his brother, Samuel Spepa Nkomo, was in the opposition, and they've also been a lot of intermarriages. So it's not something that is beyond Zimbabweans, but the problem is sometimes politicians, because they want to be elected, they use that, and then people end up fighting and doing all sorts of things. You said you were voting. That was the electronic method, right? How does it go?
Fairly quickly. I actually got my, sample ballots, which I didn't need, made my selections, slipped it right through, and in 2 seconds everything was done, and I walked out.
No glitches at all.
No glitches at all.
And Zimbabweans usually complain about rigging. Any chances of rigging? Somebody will say, "Oh, the Republicans rigged." Huh?
Well,
no chance?
I doubt that very much. I think that, America has spoken. And this is the balance of power that we talk about. And when it happens, we complain about it. This is really a shift in balance. And we get that. I'm not surprised about what happened last night, personally, because this is how the United States works. And I think your guest earlier on, talked about that as well. This is something that, when you have one party in power for a minute, the other party comes in and, just shifts the balance a little bit.
Do you see Zimbabwe going that way in the future? Is it
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm very hopeful. Change in leadership will change a lot of things. And that's coming too. It's inevitable.
Yeah, like they say, politicians like diapers, both need constant changing, and both for the same reasons.
Maybe not so constant in our situation, but it's all right. We'll get there.
Of course, for our radio listeners, we are actually streaming live. Go to www.voazimbabwe.com and press on Live Talk. This is Blessing Zulu.
And I'm Kips Dube saying, stay tuned, Zimbabwe. And Mr. Meli Dube, stay on the line.
for those of you who are just joining us, this is Studio 7 Live Talk. And tonight on Live Talk, we are talking about the U.S. midterm elections. And of course, the Republicans took control of the U.S. Senate. They already controlled the House of Representatives. They only added more members. So Mr. Obama, the president, some are already calling him a lame duck. But of course, this is how American democracy works. We'll see if the Republicans and the Democrats will be able to block the political logjam. Gibbs.
At the time we're coming for this kind of program, the Democrats had 45 kind of seats in the Senate and the Republicans 52. It appears as if this is a bit of a shellacking, right? And then no party has 60 votes actually to have its work done. So I think maybe that's the silver lining, maybe. So if you wish to join the show right now, phone us directly at this number, 001-202-619-2077, and we'll call you back. That number again, 001-202-619-2077. You can also send us a message on WhatsApp, and the number is 1-202-465-0318. Ask quick and forward.
Of course, we have messages on WhatsApp. First, we have Backland who says, the Democrats will not lead the U.S. come next general elections. And I noticed nothing gained by ordinary Zimbabweans from Barack Obama's second term. Maybe the Republicans will cause change in Zimbabwean political system. Obama was indirect, and we need a direct approach to democratic change in Zimbabwean politics. The Zimbabwean economy is down and out. Obama should have assisted by letting Zimbabweans get jobs in the U.S. to show the deficiency in Mugabe's system. That is Baklandi. It's very long, but I can just read that. Then we have Titles who says more disaster to underdeveloped nations and developing countries, more conflicts wherever America has interests. Clement says U.S. policies remains the same, especially their foreign policy.
Now, Mr. Mzorewa, what has Mr. Obama done for Africa and Zimbabwe? There's this question that is going all over the show, right?
I have heard that question quite a bit, and I've got quite an answer for it. First, when he took over the economy of this country was a mess. We're heading in the wrong direction. And I think that charity begins at home. He had to fix things here before he could fix anything else in the world. And I understand that Zimbabweans are looking for Obama or an American president to help with the situation in Zimbabwe. What are you Zimbabweans doing yourselves? What role do you play? On one hand, you say we don't want the West meddling in our affairs. And on the other, you are saying Barack Obama has not done enough. Oh, he's on the West, by the way. So I get a little confused when I hear that. But at the same time, I need for us to put forth what it is that we're willing to do. Because we vote these people into power. And so if you have said nothing, absolutely nothing up to this point, and you expect the United States to do what? Go in there and hand lift him and take him off, the office of the president? That is a Zimbabwean role. You have to speak up and do what it is that you need to remove him. And then maybe the United States can help with investments and removing the sanctions. But as far as leadership change, it needs to come from Zimbabweans. It's a Zimbabwean country, and Zimbabweans should be responsible for, putting in a leader or taking them out. I don't see how the United States really need to take care of this situation. I don't.
And I certainly agree. I think that should be handled by Zimbabweans themselves in a democratic process. That's why after every 5 years, people go and vote. That's the whole idea of a regime change. Regime change, not saying you are going to eliminate anybody, but through the ballot box, of course, not through the bullet.
Kunjalo ke baba Dube khona ngapho ke kobulawo yazwela lawe lapho ukuthi abantu bacabangela ukuthi umnumzana Obama akazange abenzele lutho ukuze kuyefika khona manje. So singazi ukuthi lina vele lifisa ukuthi wenzani njalo zongene kathesi ama Republicans libona njani kuyahamba njani?
hayi mina ngokubona kwami ngibona ngathi uObama wenza lokho ayengakwenza wamaintain ama-sanctions wanomgabe wakhuluma against ama-human rights abuses eZANU-PF. I don't expect Obama to come to Zimbabwe to do anything. Ebuye nezohlala kumbe ezoqalisa ukwenza something. Bona namaZimbabweans lawo kumele benze something. Khona lokhu it's enough for me ukuthi ngkhona uObama uyacondemn umgabe, uyacondemn human rights abuses ezikhona eZimbabwe. And igovernment yakhe support civil society, support even humanitarian activities eZimbabwe ukufitwa kwabantu ade belanjiswa ihulumende kaMgabe and other things ebezenzakala. Mbona nto khona lokho ikwenza something for Zimbabwe, which is something sibile nxa sesikhalela ukuthi enze okunye okudlula lapha ngasijabe sifuna enze. So mina ukubona kwami ngibona ngathi waqhubeka ngeAmerican ngepolicy yeAmerica wasiza ngalokho asiza ngakho and kade siyabuya ama-Republicans angiboni kutshintsha lutho ngoba ngibona nama-interest eAmerica abe lokhu efanana ngubani lobani ozangena engupresident weAmerica uyabe lokhu ementena ama-interest eAmerica ukuthi ilizwe lona le-America libenefithani ngobudlelwano balo leleZimbabwe le-Southern Africa le-Africa yonke nje jikelele.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dube, and please do stay on the line. I think we have our first caller, that is Mkululi Ndabami, if I am not... Ndabambi. Mkululi?
Mkululi Ndabami.
Good evening.
Good evening.
And Mkululi, your take on the U.S. midterm elections?
I'm a Democrat, that's how you will have. But if you look at the numbers, if you look at the actual numbers, some of the races were very, very close. Amanye, they were within just a few thousand out of hundreds of thousands, even millions of votes. But Ama Republicans, it seems they carried out what they'd wanted to do. His smear campaign on Obama worked very well. They managed to disguise Ama achievements, Ama Democrats or actually Obama. They actually, they were tied to Obama, whereas when they failed to highlight all his successes. Gerrymandering, where they redefined the borders, worked really bad against them. The Citizens United, the decision in Supreme Court, where he campaign financing, the Koch brothers just opened their wallets. So I'm a Republicans, it was a good game for them. They did very well.
So kodwa ke nxa sukhangele ke abantu beZimbabwe bangafundani ngokhetho lo?
Iqiniso Dube mina abanengi bayangisola kodwa mina ukhetho ngibona lufana ndawo zonke okubi ngokwakithi ukuthi abantu bagcina sebehlusulwa sebechaywa kodwa okwangapho ngasikhande khonoko kwe-gerrymandering le-Supreme Court decision the same thing okwenzakala ekhaya they redraw the borders in essence moving abantu courts they were I actually thought this would work for the Democrats, especially in that Obama had used internet and mobilizing abantu online, etc. But it worked in favor of the Republicans. The Koch brothers, they went on a huge media campaign and poured a lot of money into bringing them down. But I think the biggest thing with Obama was the military. He was not seen to be strong enough. Syria, Benghazi. If you look, when the American public was undecided, Bush lo Kerry, Bush carried the day because of the military. He was a strong commander-in-chief. That also was a big Achilles heel for Obama.
But is the problem not that the Democrats themselves were not very aggressive in highlighting some of Obama's signature achievements?
That was huge. Other than just not highlighting abantu labo phela bakhohlwa. Abantu bakhohlwa ukuba just years ago besilamba kodwa khathesi we're so happy umuntu enalwana who got us here asela ndabalai. We were hungry, there was no work, the outlook was really, really grim. But now people are forgetting that. You are very correct on that. What over and bigger than that, Mina, I think I'm a Democrat they were willing to throw Obama under the bus and bekhangele phambili rather than looking at now and staying united. Abanye they were not even inviting him to come and talk. And they saw him as a liability, and so they were not united in their strategy.
Thank you so much, Mkululi, for your contribution.
Thank you very much.
That takes us to a letter in Zimbabwe. It's called Bora Budondo. If you win in your constituency and the president loses,
yes,
that's a big problem. But here you can afford to tell the leader that, please, this is my constituency, please don't come here. I might actually lose an election, and the president will stay at here if it's in America at the White House, and if it's anywhere else, maybe in the State House.
Okay. It's interesting that he should point out the fact that people might have forgotten what Obama has done for them. We have a term in Shona called Matakajika Kare Anyenge Zimwana. You know what?
Yeah.
We are where we think we should be. Right now, we're moving right ahead.
Yeah.
And if they assess and say, this is not the person that's going to take us where we want to go, that's just how they make decisions.
Yeah.
And again, like I said earlier, this is not uncommon in American politics. We've seen this midterm elections, second-term president, looks fairly the same throughout the history of the democracy. So I'm seeing history being, revisited here.
Yeah.
But to your point about the president being, separate from what happens in the constituency, that's a very clear, distinction there between where we come from and what happens in the United States. Again, something to learn from.
Yeah, Mr. Dube, let's get to you there. What will happen if, let's say, Mr. Tsvangirai or Mr. Mugabe are actually campaigning for candidates, but then you tell him, no, look, don't come to Chitungiza. Don't come to Makwekwe. I don't want to see you. Right? What happens?
I think my sister has already pointed out to the I think whatever they used to call it.
Yes.
I think there is deliberate coincidence or coinciding of elections. The harmonization of the elections in Zimbabwe is a way of whipping, is a way of making sure that the president is campaigned for, is a way of making sure that the whole party campaigns at the same time as a whole entity, and there is no Bora Mudondo or something like that. Whereas the American system allows for those checks and balances, and also seeking that mandate, and also checking and having people sort of checking the powers of the presidency or checking the powers of the executive now and then, which is not there in Zimbabwe. So basically, the putting together, the harmonization of our elections does not allow for us to say the president cannot come and campaign, and so because the campaign is done at once for all candidates from council level to parliamentary level to the president himself. So to the presidential level itself. So I don't think it can happen. What Nkule was saying about Obama being snubbed, being viewed as a liability, and so it once happened, of course, in ZANU-PF. But I think the cost for those who did it was too heavy, and right now I think all parties are somewhat copying ZANU-PF in terms of adjusting their constitutions and empowering their president, and I don't see it happening in Zimbabwe.
Thank you so much. I think we are also being joined by Den Moyo. Den Moyo, of course, leads the opposition MDCT here in Washington. Mr. Moyo, good evening.
Yes, good afternoon, sir.
Afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. And now, your take on these midterm elections. Let's talk about the relations between Zimbabwe and Washington, of course. Do you foresee any changes coming because the Republicans are now controlling the Senate? We are talking about the targeted sanctions here and trade, maybe in general.
My honest assessment is that the Republicans have been more, more critical of the situation in Zimbabwe than the Democrats, and I think they are more forceful in enforcing the sanctions. So what this might mean is that they might actually want to put more pressure on the ZANU-PF government than actually loosen the sanctions like what we've seen the European Union do.
But, I mean, is this sanctions mantra still something that is sellable to say the electorate in Zimbabwe? Is it working? Because if the European Union has lifted the sanctions and America maintains the sanctions, and are they working, if I may ask? Because there have been sanctions on Cuba for a long time, North Korea, Iran. Nothing has changed.
I think with the Americans, it's a matter of principle. They don't want to be seen to be dining with the devil, so to speak. So it's not really whether they are working or not. It's just that they don't want to associate themselves with a pariah state.
Mr. Moyo, can you hold on there? I think we asked to ask a last question to Ms. Mzorewa. Now, what could be your kind of message to Zimbabweans about such elections?
Well, let's learn from it. I think that we are being given some blueprints. We are being given some proven processes to hopefully follow and use, because we are going to need this. This is not the end of Zimbabwe. It is going to be, coming to where we will need to have a president in place at some point. And I do know that a lot of people might be surprised by this, but it is coming. I hope not. But it is coming. We definitely, the peace that comes with the elections in this country, honestly, is the thing that I really would like every Zimbabwean to memorize and say, I can disagree with you, but I do not have to be enemies with you. I do not have to hurt you or your family because I'm in disagreement of, policies and beliefs.
Wise words indeed. And thank you so much, Aleta, for joining us this evening and talking about the U.S. elections and, of course, the implications on Zimbabwe in general. Gibbs.
Yes, Mrs. Wewe Baba Moyo. Lokhu secingweni khona.
Yebo ngikhona baba.
Akutsho ke ukuthi abantu beZimbabwe bangafundani ngakhona kokwenzakalayo. Okwenzakale khona lapha eMelika.
Hey, kuningi esingakufunda njengabantu beZimbabwe ngendlela amanye ama-elections, amanye amazwe aholda ngakhona ama-elections abo. Okokuqala njengoba echilo udadewethu lo oqeda ukukhuluma manje okukhulu yiko lokho ukuthi silala ilungelo lokuthi sihlukane ngemicabango lemibono esenze sibe lokhetho olungabandluliliyo njalo kube lokhetho oluzothola ukuthi akulama disputes oluzileyo ukuthi ayingiluzile kahle ngoba uyabe sazi ukuthi ukhetho lwenziwe ngendlela elungileyo njalo yikho kufunwa ngabantu. So ngiyazi ukuthi thina eZimbabwe indlela yethu isasende isasekhatshana ukuthi size sifike kuleso stage sokuthi sikwazi ukuthi you are still a winner noma udliwe ngoba at least uphakamile wamela ama-beliefs akho lo mbono wakho ukuthi izinto ngabe zikhamba ngayiphi indlela. So wakubeka ezandleni zabantu abantu bona bazikhethele ukuthi bona babona nguye ongabamela nguphi lapha e-America kunjalo kuya ngokuthi imbono yakho lesithembiso zakho ebantwini abantu bazemukela kanjanani and abantu bakwenza lokhu bekhululekile. Awubona imapholisa, awubona izinja, awubona amasotsha mabe siyavota bahamba bekhululekile. And therefore kuba lula nathi nje ngasingafunda njengabantu beZimbabwe ukuthi ukhetho akusikho ukuthi siqala ukuzondana singaba lalo ukhetho sibe ngomakhelwana sibelieve amaphatha ahlukene singaxabani singani.
Hayi sibongile kakhulu ke Mnumzana Moyo ungadinela kusasa uphenduke phela sabe sekuthinta baba. Yes, what Mr. Moyo was saying is that, having some political differences does not mean that people should fight, physically. You can fight using your own mind, He says that works.
Indeed, I think we are waiting for that day. And of course, we welcome back our guest, Thokozile Mkwananzi. Thokozile, you heard what Mr. Moyo has just said about conducting elections that where no blood is being spilled, like we saw in 2008 in Zimbabwe, for example. Is that something, Tokozile, that can be done in Zimbabwe, where elections, are held in peace without fighting, without some saying, no, they were not fair, where there is media freedom and all that?
Well, I think the hard cry for the people in Zimbabwe is to have leadership that is really concerned about the welfare of the people. Because basically, I think when you look at leadership, you have to decide what your objectives are. Are you there to serve the people, or are you in a leadership role so that people can serve you?
Yeah.
And so I think basically that is what we're looking for in Zimbabwe, and that's what the masses in Zimbabwe are really crying for. And we can only remain optimistic that one of these days someone is going to rise up in Zimbabwe and say, I am not necessarily concerned about serving my personal interests, but I'm concerned about serving the interests of the people and the welfare of the people. And I think at that point, it really won't matter, whether you're getting the support or not, because at that point, people will have spoken, and then you will be able to respect the voice of the people. And that's what Zimbabwe is looking for. And we're really hoping that one of these days we'll get that kind of caliber of leadership.
Kodwa abantu abasoze bethuke ukuthi bangakwenza khona ukubabulawa kumbe ukuthi nxa ufuna ukuthi engena khona embusweni
because basically, people can really see when a leader is legitimate and they are concerned about, because your work speaks for themselves, the things that they do. I've always said that the day that I'm going to see a leader who is looking into building our schools and building our infrastructures, someone who is going to look to see that there is economic development in the country and there are tangible actions that they're doing, people are not going to struggle, because people are not stupid. They can see a good leader because the works will speak for themselves. And that's what Zimbabwe is looking for. And let me say, that's what Africa is looking for.
Yes, sizwe ngizokuthiwa ke uNdabambi sephendukile njalo. Mkhululi ukhona ecingweni baba? Mkhululi Ndabambi? Kwanzana hayi phone yakhe siqhumekile. Hayi sizaku
uDube.
Inkhona Dube uyangizwa?
Oye, akuphosela ukucina khona lapho sizwe ukuthi ubusithini kanti sibaba.
Well, ama-election lawa asitshengisela ukuba abantu be-America were not happy with the direction that the country was going. But at the same token, I don't think it's a reflection of Uguti they are welcoming Republicans back. I don't think this gives Republicans a mandate. I think it gives them chances to talk about the issues which got Democrats to this position. And now Democrats, they have a lot of work to do come 2016.
Hayi siyakuzwa kakhulu ke. Hayi uphenduke futhi lesikhathi esibuyayo siza kudinga sixoxe lawe nxa sikhuluma ngendaba ezinje. Otherwise sibonge kakhulu baba Ndabambi. Ungathina kusasa.
Isibonge Dube.
Yeah, siyabonga. Listen.
Mr. Dube, are you still on the line?
Yes, I'm on the line, Mr. Zulu.
Now, let's talk about media freedom. It has remained a bit problematic in Zimbabwe, for many years now. And there is now this new constitution which calls for fair coverage. But we are being told that laws have not been aligned and all sorts of excuses. What is the problem?
I wouldn't know what the problem is, because I'm also wondering, like you guys. But my suspicion is that the ZANU-PF government is not yet sure of whether to open up the airways or not, because I think, in all honesty, they want to be sure of where their factionalism is going. They want to be sure of whether the opening up of the media will put them at an advantage or not. Because if it doesn't put them at an advantage, I suppose they would have to stall it, or even slightly morph it, slightly change it, and have a tokenistic kind of licensing, where they give their own ZANU-PF people or own apologists who will frame some independence or some independent stations and so forth to run or even to occupy the spaces, but they will still be largely following the editorial policy of the state-controlled media.
Thank you. Next time I will not have to bother you about those questions. I will just invite someone from ZANU-PF. I don't want you to get angry on behalf of ZANU-PF. Right, Mr. Dube? Gibbs, we have two texts here on WhatsApp. The first one is from Tawanda, who says, in a way, the next president for the U.S. will be a Democrat for various reasons. He's not stating the reasons. Then there's Matthew, who says it shows a real democracy, not one-party state we face in Africa.
You know, I still remember Mr. Zulu was talking about this hate speech in the media. Now, turning to the U.S. Kind of media, are you happy with the coverage? Now, with the reflection of saying, okay, in Zimbabwe, we have the papers like the Herald that is state-controlled. You know, it uses terms like, you know, when somebody says, down with so-and-so, down with Kamatox, down with Weevils, and all those kind of things. They use that kind of, diction. So at the end of the day, here in USA, did you see any of that kind of hate speech?
Well, there was. I mean, of course, the race card, I think, has been used tremendously, especially when it comes to Obama as a president. Personally, I don't think that's a strong argument because when you look at the history of this country, every president has been criticized. And hence, if someone rises up and rightfully uses their rights to criticize a president, then they should not be labeled to be racist. And I think that actually, especially when you look at a lot of the campaigning that was going on, the race card was used in a lot of these states to the extent that, in my mind, I wasn't really sure, how people were going to be impacted. But despite, all that negative campaigning that occurred, people were able to make their decision, which is pretty good.
Politicians are politicians, whether in Africa, in the US, they can use any kind of language to make sure that they are elected into office. Gibbs.
Yeah, Baba Tube, sibuze njalo kuti wena ngombono wakho ubona zani kuzathatha isikhathi esinganani uzele Zimbabwe ligcina lalo phela sokusithi nxa ukuthi uGibbs Dube engumRepublican wena mnumzana Meli ungumDemocrat kuhamba njani kodwa ngitsho ukuthi kube njalo phela qhubeka baba ukhona Dube uDube ungazani sesimlozile uzile umbuzo wami
ngozile umbuzo wakho ngiphendula right ukuthi wena ube ngumRepublican mina ngumDemocrat but into engayisho ukuthi akusonda ukuthi isikhathi esinganani ukuthi Zimbabwe singathi kuzayithatha isikhathi esinganani akusonda isikhathi. It's not about time for me. I think it's about the political. It's about what citizens do, how much control they take into their own hands to basically control their own destiny. Because I think all dictators or non-dictators, they are there as benevolence yama citizens or even liking yama citizens. So Tina, I think as Zimbabweans it is sivumele ukuthi kube nje and nxa singafika ezingeni lokuthi sithi hayi lokhu sokwanele kasawufuni sokumele kube lokunye okukhona elizweni kuyatshintsha nje overnight and kutshintshe ngani ngamasalamusi ngoba lezi izinto zokuthi ngubani ophetheyo and ophetheyo ucabanga njani ubehave njani uziphatha njani ubusa njani and iZimbabwe ngalunga nje kungensuku zatshwana. Ungakhangela amazwe njengabo Zambia ukhangela ukuthi okhawunda basebehlala isikhathi esinganani but bathe bephuma nje kwaguquguquka nje ngesikhathana esifitshane iZambia kade sibe lama-president amaningi of course abanye bebedlula emhlabeni kungesintando kabani kodwa I think sesitsho sibili eqinisweni into zepolitiki ezintsha ngayo
isikhathi manje Dube isikhathi kodwa uchayile baba siyabonga.
Unfortunately, time is not our best ally, and we have to end it here. We want to thank our guests this evening. First, our in-studio guest, Thokozile Mkhwananzi, a Zimbabwean based here in the US, and then Aleta Muzorewa, also another Zimbabwean in the US, and Jim Malone, VOA senior reporter, and from Bulawayo, Meli Dube. Signing off, this is yours truly, Blessing Zulu.
And Gibbs Dube saying let's meet on Friday. Good night.